All right, so good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our first book club meeting of the year 2022. We're starting off really strong with Colson Whiteheads, The Underground Railroad. I am Felicia Durden, the facilitator, and it's just my pleasure to have you all on tonight. We're going to be going through the first 4 chapters, and then next month we will finish the book. So we're going to start a little slow to get where we want to go.
Oh, okay. I got it.
All right. So Colson Whitehead, we actually just finished up last year with his book Nickel Boys, which we loved. And so we're going to continue with him for this month for his Pulitzer Prize winning book. So he is known as Arch Colson Chip Whitehead. That's his full name. And he was born November the 6th, 1969. He's a well-renowned American author and novelist. He's written 8 novels. His 1999 debut book was called The Intuitionist. He wrote The Underground Railroad, our book that we're studying, in 2016. And for that book, he won the 2016 National Book Award and the 2017 Pulitzer Prize for Fiction Award. And the last book that we read by Colson, The Nickel Boys, he won the Pulitzer Prize for Fiction in 2020 for that book. So he is, again, well-renowned. It's not easy to win a Pulitzer Prize. It's because of his ability to tell stories about America with a twist. I think that you'll agree from reading this book that he is a master storyteller and really gets into the feelings of the characters and really puts you there. So I want to ask you guys, what word comes to mind when you think about the Underground Railroad? What words do you think of when we mention the Underground Railroad? Maybe people, places, things. What comes to mind for you?
For me, I'll begin by just saying courage and strength and hope. Those 3 words came through.
Yeah.
And especially women, the woman herself. But I mean, those 3 words came right away.
I love that. Courage, strength, and
hope.
Beautiful. Thank you, Christine. I love that.
Sure.
Carol?
Carol, yeah, I felt that it showed just the ingenious ways that a human can survive certain situations, and how you're thinking and trying to figure out your circumstances that you're living in and still how to change your current status.
Yes, yes. Beautiful and so true. So true. I think you guys hit it. Anyone else like to share a word or thought that comes to mind when you think of the Underground Railroad? Okay. If not, let's look at Colson. We always like to let the author speak in their own words before we get into it. So I have a video that he actually made for Audible, where he talked about his characters in his book. Oops. And we're going to go over the first part and we'll finish the second part next week. So here we go. I think we're there.
I was sitting on my couch about 16 years ago and maybe heard a reference to the Underground Railroad on the TV. And I was like, oh, it's so funny when you're a kid. That's how you envision it. You envision a literal Underground Railroad, like a subway. What if it actually was a literal Underground Railroad? And then that's sort of like a premise, not much of a plot there. Then I came up with a kind of Gulliver's Travels type structure where each state our protagonist goes through would be a different state of American possibilities. And the more I would talk about this Underground Railroad idea with like my wife or my agent, the more sort of enthusiasm I got. I would say, oh, it's gonna be so hard. And they'd say, it sounds really good though. Also, I felt if I waited, I might be a better writer. So sometimes you feel like you have a good idea, but you're not sure if you can do it justice. And then it just seemed like maybe the hard thing is the thing you should be doing. If you don't know you can do it, why not try it?
Good question.
Really, to challenge myself, I had a female protagonist before, but it seemed I'd had a string of male protagonists, so really just to vary it up. And then I hadn't explored a mother-daughter relationship before, so it seemed a good opportunity to try something new. It is a very different state of horror being a woman under slavery than a man. Once you hit puberty, you're supposed to make more slaves, and you have no agency over who you marry or what's going to happen to your children.
What does Cora's 3 feet of dirt
Cora's on
represent?
a plantation in Georgia, and her grandmother has staked out a little garden where she grows vegetables, and it's handed down to Cora's mother and then to Cora once Cora's mother disappears. You have nothing. All you have is the clothes on your back, basically. But Cora has this one gift of a garden on the plantation, and it's the one thing she can fight for, the one thing she can call her own. So in the midst of a complete lack of agency, she has power and a place to be creative on the plantation.
What did it mean for Cora to leave the plantation?
You know, Cora's never left the plantation before she makes the brave decision to run. And in these different states that she's in, South Carolina or Tennessee, she is getting more and more agency and is becoming more of a person in the world and is becoming more active. The further she gets from her original plantation, the more she enters into herself, her Cora-ness. So that's part of, you know, the trajectory of the book and her life.
Why is there so much animosity within the
In terms of the
slave community?
plantation, I guess in pop culture, there's an idea that you have 80 slaves living together, they're helping each other out. Maybe there's like a Uncle Tom or a turncoat, but they're all in together. I mean, and this seems from my idea of human psychology and how people act. If you have 80 people, you know, 8 people are saints, 8 people are terrible, and the rest sort of migrate in between different bits of behavior. But, you know, we talk about PTSD, they're actually not post anything. They're enduring trauma every minute of their lives. And so they're not going to be on their best behavior. They are going to be fighting for every single scrap of dignity that they can have, any kind of advantage to get them through.
Do you believe that human beings ultimately turn on one another?
There's a chapter where there's a white supremacist state where Black people are outlawed. And if you harbor a slave, you will be punished too. And so people are informing on each other in the way that you might find in Nazi Germany or severe socialist states where people are informing each other so as not to be put in prison themselves or be punished. We'd like to think that if we were put in those situations, we would be our best selves. But if your family's being threatened or your livelihood, maybe you do turn in the teacher who's teaching students inflammatory rhetoric against the state. And so who knows what we do in those situations.
Okay, we're going to stop there. Next week, he'll talk about how he blended history with fantasy, which I think he did a phenomenal job with. But that's him in his own words and why he chose to have a protagonist that was female, where the idea came from, the premise behind this beautiful book. I just always think it's important that we see what the author themselves have to say. So we'll move on to the next slide. I wanted to just show some artwork that depicts the Underground Railroad here, because again, he is going from when he said when he was a young child, he thought, oh, Underground Railroad, he thought of actually a railroad station and cars and, you know, Underground Railroad, or it's a railroad, which is what he put in the premise in this book. But we know that the Underground Railroad was in fact not very different from that. So I love this picture, but I have a few others that you're probably familiar with. I don't know if you've ever seen this one, but this is just a family getting ready to, they're escaping and you see the floor open. So they're putting the baby down and the lady's underground. The white lady there would be an abolitionist helping them to get to their freedom. This is just a beautiful picture of this family trying to find freedom.
It reminded me of the World War II period with children being rounded up and their parents giving them up so that they could flee Nazi Germany.
Yes, yes. Beautiful connection. And here we go with, I know you've probably seen this one before. This is a very famous depiction. They're getting ready to cross the river. Their tattered clothes of the males. believe this is depicted to be Harriet Tubman, if I'm not mistaken. And again, we see a child, a beautiful child, so that they could have a better future. And so I didn't want to start talking about the book until we went back to see, how it was depicted through art. Art can tell us so much, and we can see the emotion of this hope. I think that was one of the things we talked about, hope being one of the things we think about with the Underground Railroad, courage and strength. It took that to escape. Like he was saying, these people were in trauma all the time. Talk about post-traumatic stress syndrome. They're in stress continually, continuous trauma. Yet they had the strength to do this. This was very hard to run away, to do this. Cora couldn't do it at first, as we recall. It took something to break her, because she was ready to go with Caesar. So just some context. We know, again, that he is writing this as a fictional book, and he did a phenomenal job. We know that the real Underground Railroad was a network of white and other people of color and other colors, abolitionists. Some were Blacks who had previously been enslaved, and they worked to smuggle runaways from these Southern plantations to free states in America, as well as to the Caribbean, Mexico, and Canada.
Yes.
And they would hide the Black fugitives in stations. The stations were houses, churches, businesses, anywhere along that Underground Railroad where they could be protected until they could go to the next station. The world's first subway system, London's Metropolitan Railway, opened its gates in 1863. That's the same year that the US Underground Railroad stopped working in secret and began operating as part of a Union war effort. Whitehead's novel does play with this timeline by turning the real Underground Railroad into a literal subway system with routes that connect the southernmost United States to Canada. So he knew his history, and he judged it into his book, which is, again, I think he's a great storyteller of marrying fiction with history, just like he did with the Nickel Boys. As with the real abolitionist network, the Underground Railroad operators, they operate in secret. They can't be under the watchful eye of these slave catchers. This was an underground secret with conductors and passengers. Whitehead's Railroad is just as dangerous for Cora and her friends as those real life routes.
It was a very dangerous undertaking for everyone.
Yes, everyone.
The right thing.
Even those who helped them escape, they were in great danger.
Yes.
So he did a really good job of what he's writing about is true. It truly was that dangerous. All right, so that's our context. I love Cora, the protagonist. She's our main character. In the first chapter, we learn about her grandmother, Ajare, and then Caesar, who finally convinces Cora to run away with him.
Yes.
So with that being said, we're going to go through the first 4 chapters. Chapter 1 was really about the escape from slavery, I thought. Chapter 2, life on the Randall plantation. Chapter 3 is all about expansion and profiting from slave labor. And
I thought it gave us a good idea of how the plantation was set up. And it begins to show you the character and the nature of Cora.
Right. Yes. Very, very good at showing us the characters and their character, what their stock is made of. He does a phenomenal job with that. All right, so let's dig into chapter 1, called Ajare. The first line of the book, Cora refuses to run away. It says, I'll get my book here.
And what page are you going to be on, Professor?
Just the first page in chapter
okay.
Ajare.
All right.
It says, the first time Caesar approached Cora about running north, she said no. That's the first word. She said no. This is her grandmother talking. Cora's grandmother had never seen the ocean before that bright afternoon in the port of Udall, and the water dazzled after her time in the fort's dungeon. The dungeon stored them until the ships arrived. So it tells us, it's a foreshadowing that she is going to run away. But it says the first time he asked her, she said no. The rest of this chapter tells us about Cora's grandmother. And my question to you guys is, Cora at first, it says that was her grandmother talking. How was she influenced by her grandmother, Cora, in the way that she behaved and in the life that she led on the
Say
plantation?
that again, honey. I'm sorry.
Sure. How was Cora's grandmother an influence on Cora in the way that she behaved and reacted on the plantation?
I think because the grandmother was one of the original slaves to come there and established a routine, and she was very well respected. So Cora basically came from a well-respected family.
Yes.
And that network. And the grandmother left her a legacy, the garden.
The garden. Right. And he talked about that garden, that was
That's
very
good.
special.
That's good.
Good.
Yes. Good.
Yeah.
Good.
Chris?
You know, the garden, if you think about cultures and other cultures, it's the soil, it's the dirt, it's the belonging to the earth, using the soil and the mud and the dirt to grow flowers or vegetables or something of substance. And so in different cultures, one always learns, even a child, from the grandmother, the importance of learning about roots or flowers or how to take care of plants so that they then become medicinal or herbs. And so it's that dirt.
Yes.
It's the dirt, the smell of the dirt when it rains or when it's not raining, but it's just the dirt itself is a symbol of life.
Yes, it is. It's life, the earth. Beautiful, beautiful.
And there had been a law that was out. It was called the Negro Law, where they were not allowed to grow any vegetables or food, maintain any cattle or anything like that. So growing the food was really a way to stay healthy.
Yes, it was.
And again, as Christina said, with the medicines to figure out how to cure yourself because you knew you weren't going to have a doctor. So you brought all of your old cultures, and all of them came from so many different countries that they had all those skills, that they would know the plants, even though they weren't indigenous to the area, they could figure it out.
Yes.
That's an excellent point.
It's really very significant, as you said.
Yeah.
Excellent.
And the one thing that they always worried about was water. Is there going to be water to grow plants or vegetables? Is there going to be water just for life? So you have to think about nature, the elements, things that can happen suddenly. You have to be prepared for. But I think it's that connection that we have with the earth and the importance of water. Even though we don't read about water so much in the beginning, we understand how important that is.
Yes.
For different reasons, and it becomes important later in the story.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah.
I think he did a really good job of setting us up in this first chapter. Carol, Christine, excellent observations. Let's move on to chapter 2, Georgia. So this is Cora's mother, we know, ran away when Cora was 10 or 11. And without a mother, Cora became a misfit amongst the slaves. And she was sent to live in the Hob.
Right.
And that Hob was that place where women who didn't belong anywhere or had mental instability were. How do you think that affected Cora?
Say that again, honey.
How did that affect Cora? How did being placed in the Hob affect her later on, or just in general? How do you think, why did he do this? What effect did this maybe have on her?
Being so isolated, and then you're labeled as crazy, useless. There was a safety being a woman of Hobbes, as well as a shame of being a woman of Hobbes. And I think that gave her strength to be alone and to make her own decisions, which come up later in the book when she says, I can decide things for myself.
Yes.
So without her even knowing it, it was really developing her character for later.
It was a blessing in disguise. It developed her into who she was to be. Excellent. Now, we remember they were having the celebration for, I believe, it's
The birthday.
The birthday
Yes.
celebration. And
Yes.
Cora didn't like these celebrations. She thought it was a way that they were subduing us
Right.
so that there wouldn't be any chance of rebellion. Let's talk about that. How did the slave masters, they had us dance before them, give you like a little time, that's your only free time to celebrate. Why did she have that sinister belief?
Because everything that we did, they made it a negative. Everything was a negative thing. You don't exist. Everything was to humiliate you. You don't have a birthday. You're not human. You're not this. And even though everyone knew that, you still had to find some pleasure somewhere. So you would create a birthday, you would create a festival, you knew that you were being laughed at. But the funniest thing is that in time, many of the songs were signals that were used in the underground.
Yes.
So we turned every negative thing, we turned into a positive.
Excellent point. We're going to talk more about music next week and spirituals.
Yeah.
Oh, not next week, next month.
Mhm.
Excellent, excellent.
I think another point is it also keeps you, it's like ruling with an iron fist, keeps them in a childlike, subdued, a lower level of inferiority so that you have this fear of consequences for anything you do to exert independence and freedom. So to keep them
Yeah,
childlike.
that's a good one. Keep
Control.
them childlike. Thank you, Tara. Keep them childlike.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Mhm.
right, right. Now, what did y'all think? Were you shocked when Cora bashed that young white boy's head so she wouldn't be captured at the end of chapter 2?
No, that's when she protected the boy from being beaten.
Mhm.
What
Mhm.
was your thought on that with her? Is she a murderer?
Is that already in that? That's the runaway chapter?
I'm in chapter 2. So let me
Oh,
get it.
okay.
Hold on. I'm in Georgia.
Oh, in Georgia, it's murder,
Mhm,
but it was self-defense.
mhm.
And it's unfortunate, it's a necessary evil. They don't give a second thought to killing us, but we're supposed to care so much
Page
when we're
60.
defending ourselves.
Page 60. So page 60, second paragraph. Well, let's use page 60, second paragraph. Lovely howled as the two men dragged her into the darkness. Cora's assailant was boyish and slender, perhaps the son of one of the other hunters. She was taken unawares, but the moment he laid hands on her person, her blood quickened. She was brought back to the night behind the smokehouse when Edward and Pot and the rest brutalized her.
Mhm.
She battled. Strength poured into her limbs. She bit and slapped and bashed, fighting now as she had never been able to then. She realized she had dropped her hatchet. She wanted it. Edward was in the dirt, and this boy would join him too before she was taken. The boy yanked Cora to the ground. She rolled over and bashed her head against a stump. He scrambled to her, pinning her. Her blood was hot. She reached down and came up with a rock, and she slammed it into the boy's skull. He reeled, and she repeated her assault. His groans ceased. Time was a fragment. Caesar called her name, pulling her up. The bearded man had fled, and much as the darkness allowed to see, this way. Cora cried after her friend.
Mhm. That was probably her only friend, if you think about it. Someone she trusted and someone that was like her. And to see and to know that her friend was gone in different ways, it was probably very, very, very shattering. Very difficult to cope with that and to see it, to be a witness to that kind of
Yeah.
violence. Yeah.
Right, right.
Mhm.
And I think it bothered her because she knew she could do nothing but go
Yeah.
forward,
Mhm.
that her fate at that point was sealed.
That was it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. There was nowhere to turn. Excellent.
She had to keep going forward. That was the whole point of
Yes.
everything. Keep going forward, and not look back.
No,
And it just keep going and to live. That's what you have to
Right.
do.
yes, yes.
Mhm.
Great.
Mhm.
Now, chapter 3 is Ridgway. That one's the one Ridgway.
Yeah, Ridgeway.
How did a man like Ridgway come to become so cruel and sadistic? What do you guys think? And my follow-up is, does existing within an evil system make everyone complacent with that type of evil?
Yes, it was, as long as someone else was doing it. It's so typical. Let
Mhm,
someone else do the dirty work and just get it done. They're just a piece of property. Why should we care? That's society. And
mhm.
it's all about the money. And after a while, it happens today. You just
Yes.
turn a blind eye and let it go. And people like Ridgway become very vital to the society, the
Mm,
underbelly of the society of
mhm.
America.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
I think he took pride in being an excellent slave catcher. That was what he was known for, to be a slave catcher, period. That was it.
That
He
was
was
it.
proud. He was proud of that. He didn't have anything else to worry about being. That was his identity. And it didn't matter who he was after. He knew that he could capture and find a slave and get that slave to come back. I mean, that's
Yes.
what he did his whole life.
Yeah.
His
Well, yeah, that
father,
was his job.
yeah, I think his father wasn't his father also a slave catcher?
Yeah, I believe so. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm. That's all he knew. I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
he did a really good job in this chapter of really, like Carol said, it's a mirror to modern times.
Mhm.
Does existing within an evil system make everyone complacent with that evil?
Right. You let someone else do the dirty work and you walk
Sounds like
around clean, unaware.
Mhm. It just becomes the norm.
Hmm.
Uh-huh.
Mm.
Anything else stand out to you guys in chapter 3?
I think that he probably saw himself as a patriot. In his own way, he thinks he's a freedom fighter because he's in his way, keeping
Yes.
order, and
Mhm.
in a sadistic way, keeping order in the country. Almost
Yeah.
like,
True.
modern day times. I'm holding up old
Mhm.
systems that have been put in place to support white supremacy against, and misogyny. So
Yes.
it's pretty consistent, and he doesn't think he's wrong.
No, he doesn't see anything wrong. Good point, Tara. Thank you.
Excellent.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, no one is telling him that he's wrong. Look
No.
at he's a boy man, but he's a man. He's strong. He's probably robust. He probably eats very well. He probably lives better than others,
Mhm.
and he is his own self-made man. And people are afraid of him. They fear him because of what he does. And
Right.
he probably looks like what he is, a slave
Yep.
catcher.
Uh-huh.
So I think it's for him, for this Ridgway, he is proud to be Ridgway.
Mhm. That's how they become so cruel and sadistic. It's
Yes.
expected. Very
It's
good.
allowed.
Yeah.
It's
Mhm.
unfortunate.
Yeah.
All right. The last chapter we're going to talk about tonight is chapter 4, called South Carolina. This is where they finally escape, and Cora now's Bessie, and Caesar's Christian. I found to talk about that sterilization. Remember when they talked about sterilizing?
Oh, I want to talk about that one.
What are you guys' thoughts on that?
They did the same thing. It's called genocide. They did the same thing with the Native Americans. It is simply a way of eliminating an entire population, and how just the way they slowly convince you this is the correct thing to do, and I'm doing it for you. It's for the benefit of everybody. They give you that great voice and sell you that lie. And they'll do that with everything, with the medicines. Even it made me realize when the old people would not go to the doctors and say, I'm not going to the doctor. Now I know why. You couldn't trust him. They would tell you anything. And all the experiments that were going on, especially with syphilis, that was a big thing.
Exactly.
And we were simply used as the guinea pigs for experiments. And everybody knows that the lower you are in society, the more you are used as the guinea pigs, whether
Right.
you're in jail, if you're an orphan, if you're single, they simply go after you. And you don't even know what questions to ask.
Right.
because
Right.
it's such a heinous thing to be done. Okay, I'm done. I
Oh,
got
no,
off my
that's
soapbox.
really good. That's okay. And they found out about this because that drunk doctor, spilled the beans, and
Yeah.
they knew all about this. Good points about that. Any other thoughts about sterilization efforts on Blacks? I think that's a huge point that he made in
Oh,
page
it was
102, 103,
excellent.
there's a doctor's office and all those. What do you guys think? Tara or Chris?
Mhm. Well, they did have they did and they didn't have choices to make. They were ordered, but they still resisted in a different way. They made a decision, yes or no, because they feared what would happen, but at the same time, they still held back, and they just trusted their own instincts of not going ahead and being a victim in this way. They were able to resist.
Some were, not most of them didn't know.
Yes, yeah, that's
It's
right.
just done. And you have to remember, they were under the government. The government controlled them. The government gave them the name. So no, it was risky. And that's why, I forget the woman's name, was a little upset with Cora, telling her, you need to tell them, be a credit
Miss
to your
Lucy?
people and tell them to do this
Mhm.
Oh,
without resisting. It's the game that's always played.
It's a
Follow
big,
along,
follow along, be the sheep.
and like the Indians, let's sign a treaty and see how that goes.
Mhm.
mhm.
Mhm. Good point. And Chris, thank you.
I'm sorry.
Tara? No, it's okay. Tara?
Well, yeah, that makes sense. Sure, makes sense.
Mhm.
I don't have any extra to add. I just know that the 90-year-old family member friend that we have that has that experience, lived it, and doesn't like going to the doctors, and would probably say these things. The modern me wouldn't take it as serious as I probably should, just to listen and pause and say, why does someone from that era have this belief? Because they've
Mhm.
lived a history that I haven't lived. And I think that
Good.
I need to be more aware of that when I hear it.
Good point. Thank you.
You still
That's
live.
the connection. That's why these books are so good.
Mhm,
Uh-huh. Very, very good.
mhm.
We're just getting into the meat of it. I mean, chapter 4, I wanted to stop there because we're going to finish the book for next week. I want everyone to have a chance to read through,
Yeah.
so that we can, I don't want to go too deep into it and give away too much.
Okay.
It's just, this was really rich conversation. I think we can see again how skillful Colson Whitehead is in
Yes.
writing. I mean, he is brilliant in the stories he tells, and the way that he's able to depict it is just beautiful. And you guys hit all the key points. I'm so
Mhm.
excited. That was awesome. Awesome.
I think his narrative is so well done because you can see the images in your mind. His descriptions are so
Mhm.
clear. Even though you may not have read enough novels or you know
Yeah.
enough about that era or about the whole industry of cotton and
Uh-huh.
the importance of cotton in the South and elsewhere. I mean, look how important cotton picking becomes during World War II,
Right.
when you have people picking cotton for the war effort, because you need cotton to make clothing, uniforms, and so forth. Arizona became a very important cotton state during World War II. And so you have to remember this industry of cotton making, cotton picking, cotton pickers, the
Mhm.
whole industry of who's making the money and the profits of the labor of those who are pickers and how those who are exploited. It's people who have no choice because they're slaves in different ways. It can be
Mhm.
Mexican workers in the agricultural era in World War II in California, or the cotton pickers in the migrant camps in Arizona who are from Litchfield or Goodyear during picking cotton for the war effort there. But in this industry here in the South, it's so important, the cotton industry, what it becomes and who makes money, and who there's always going to be slave labor
Yeah.
to make others rich. Say white's rich because they own the farm, they own the cotton industry in a different way. They can make the choice of determining the value and the price of cotton. You can pick cotton, and if they charge you you think they're going to pay you by your labor and by how many pounds you're
Mm.
picking, and then at the last minute they change the price.
Oh,
That
yeah.
that happened.
Mhm.
You're dragging along your cotton bag, and you think you're going to make money because it weighs so much according to the prices that they were quoted, and then they change, and you get nothing.
Mm.
It's that labor. And
Yeah.
so I think we learned in this Underground Railroad, the novel, the big player is cotton,
Yeah.
the cotton industry.
It's almost another character, right?
Yeah.
Good. Well,
Yeah.
he was called, thank you. Colson is called one of the best living American novelists. That was from the Chicago Tribune. A brilliant reimagining of antebellum America. That's the New Republic.
Mhm.
He's just what you're saying. He is a great novelist, and I'm so glad that we're reading this book. It's just going to get better. I told you guys the Nickel Boys. Remember how awesome that was.
Oh, boy.
This book is phenomenal too. So
Yes,
we're
yeah.
going to finish it. So you guys have 4 weeks to finish it, chapters 5 through 12. And on the 24th, we'll meet again at 6 p.m. Carol, I'm going to be talking about quilts, and I know you're doing something with the museum with quilts for kids. So I want you to be ready to pipe in on that, how the quilts were used with the Underground Railroad. We're going to talk about Negro spirituals. Just be a really rich conversation to tie it all together. So
Good,
that'll be for next time.
good.
Okay.
I like that. Yeah.
All right. Oh, I think Carol dropped. Oh, no. All right. So we will be back together on the 24th at 6 p.m. So with
Okay.
that, we will end. So
Wow, it was a great discussion. Really
was
good.